Russ of Aquarimax Pets here. I see that Corey Dora is here. SXRRY, not sure how to pronounce it. Cirksy. Wendy Hickson, Sean Meister, all here. Good to see ya. It's the first live stream of 2024, as I'm sure I don't have to tell you. And I'm excited to be back. Had a little bit of a break. Break was good. But we also had some nice participation here in Patreon about what people wanted to talk about. And I know this enclosure that you see here, this deli cup that you see here is not terribly fascinating. I agree with you. But it's going to be more fascinating because I'm going to put some isopods in it. And we're going to work on a project while we discuss some questions from Patreon. So what I'm going to do is put some isopods in here. First person to recognize which type of isopod I'm putting in there, please shout it out. Would love to hear your input on that. Going to make sure that we have chat enabled. Oh, there, it's a little better. I see we have Regina and Kearns 28, Lake Two Land Aquatics, Cosmic Creatures, Joseph Tevere, iBugman, Theropod Hunter, HS, Young Lad, and Panda Carol, or Paula Carol, sorry, Panda, she said. Yotaro, Orange, Orang Mango, Tennyson Kingsley. Hey, Tennyson, I got to say, we had a little bit of communication about fermented substrates, and I've been doing some fun experimentation in using what we talked about as an inspiration and then adding some methods for fermenting substrate that I had learned from some other projects that I'd worked on. And the results are so far pretty encouraging. Once I determine whether or not it's sustainable and workable for everyone to do, if it indeed turns out to be so, then I will definitely share my results. It's too early to say, but so far they've been very encouraging. So thank you for the information you provided. It gave me a great starting point, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I see some more people are here too. Corey Dora, sorry to hear your isopods aren't doing too well. What kind do you have? What kind of isopods are you working with? Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, Happy New Year to you as well. Great to see you back again. Been since last year. Alex McQuillan, hey, welcome. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize that was still making noise, but it looks like we just got a new patron, which is awesome. Love that. Did have a good Christmas. Got to visit with family and various sorts of celebrations together with the family. It was pretty awesome. So I see that. Oh, I can't remember if I welcomed 503 not here yet, but here we are. Oh, Corey Dora, I used the wrong charcoal. That is very easy to do. Charcoal, typically that's not just 100% natural lump charcoal, can be quite detrimental to isopods, it's true. Because a lot of the others will have like chemicals to help them light more quickly and so on. That'll do it. Item 13, hello, welcome. So maybe you can get them going. Again, if you change out their substrate and try them with something else. All right, I have loads and loads of pandas and I'm trying to collect them, but they're so tiny. It can be tricky to see them. Okay, so I want to hit the Patreon questions really quickly. Well, not really quickly. I want to give them enough time, but I want to do it early on in the stream is what I mean, while I'm collecting these little Panda Kings, because collecting the Panda Kings itself doesn't require a gigantic cognitive load, so I can answer questions while I do it. So our first comment was just from Vance. Thank you, Vance, for commenting. All he said was looking forward to it, which I appreciate any comments on Patreon. So not really a question, but I'm glad, hopefully Vance is able to attend and glad you're there. Beatrice had a few comments and questions. So one question was, I got some orange hawks and only 3 were female. How many males should they keep for them not to stress? Well, I'm thinking that first of all, congratulations on orange Porcellio hoffmannseggi. That is fantastic. So I love it. That is a species that I find absolutely Hoffman's egg eye, special place in my heart. The first giant Porcelio I ever had. And the orange ones are gorgeous and easier than Porcelia magnificus, but a very similar effect. So win-win, right? Um, all right. So what I would say is, I'm not sure how many males you have, Beatrice, but if you have, say, if you have 3 females and 1 male, that's a pretty good ratio to keep them together at. I would say a ratio of 1 male to 2 or 3 females is a pretty good ratio. So if you don't have that, that's okay. It's not necessarily going to be the end of the world, but you could try to work towards that by either getting some more females if you have a preponderance of males, or if you just have a like 1 male with 3 females, that's not a bad deal at all. And as they grow, you can start separating them. A lot of people will separate their Hoffman's egg eye into bins with 1 male to 2 or 3 females, and they will often breed really well in a situation like that. Uh, Rather than keeping them a large group. It does depend on the locality and type of Porcelio Hoffman's egg eye. I find that Porcelio Hoffman's egg eye black tends to do a lot better in a crowded sort of situation than Porcelio Hoffman's egg eye, the nominate form. They don't do nearly as well when they're crowded, and they're not as prolific either. So if, but it sounds like you have the nominate form, and I would, because I believe that all the orange Porcelio Hoffman's egg eye are a morph that was isolated from the nominate form. And that's what I would recommend doing, is try to make sure you have 1 male to 2 to 3 females. And if you're not there at all with what you got, don't despair. Just try to work your way that way over time, as you know, in the next generation or so, or get some more stock. I don't know how expensive. I believe you are here in Scandinavia, I want to say, if I remember correctly, and the prices for orange Hoffman's egg eye and the availability may be quite different than it is here. So I don't want to make any assumptions. So let's see. Let's see. Johnny B. Hiking. Do you know how to care for zebras? Yes. You should check out my my care guide video on that. Zebras are fairly undemanding, but if you were to check out my care guide, you'd get some more specific info on that. I think you would find it useful. It's about a year or 2 old, but the information's still pretty good, I think. Chantal's Critters, hello. Nice to have you joining us from Canada. That's fantastic. See Destruction Warehouses here as well. Imaginary Eye, sorry to hear about your zebras. That's horrid. They passed on. They've died. Let's see. Alex McQuillan says, I've noticed the price of some rare types of isopod drops really quickly after a few years, like rubber duckies. Do you think this will happen to scarlet isopods, species Marulinella? If we get them breeding well enough, and it seems like some people are getting them breeding well enough, then yes, I think so. I didn't have excellent luck with the Marulinella that I had. I did get them breeding, but not. I didn't get any of the young to adulthood, and I know a lot of people have had that same experience, but not everybody. And I think I was just not quite dialed into their husbandry. But I think it's just a matter of time before that happens, and then the price will go down. All right, so I have another question from Beatrice. Says, how often should you feed veggies? And I assume this means to isopods in general, not just to Huffman's egg eye. It says, because I only kind of give extra food every month, which by extra food I'm confident that means supplemental food in addition to leaf litter and rotting wood in the substrate. But when they are put as cleanup crew for bugs or snails, their population explodes in number. Now, talking about snails, I believe Beatrice, since she does live in Europe and I believe Scandinavia, could be wrong about that. I don't want to mess it up, but there are no laws against keeping the giant African land snails, and I believe Beatrice keeps the giant African land snails. That is my recollection. And the giant African land snails are often kept with isopods. Not only do the snails eat a lot of things that the isopods eat, but they produce a lot of waste, and the isopods seem to be fond of that waste too. So they seem to be a match made in heaven, as it were. And so I believe that's what Beatrice is referring to. says, the population explodes in number when kept with the snails or bugs. Am I feeding too little, or is it the waste from the other animals doing it? Well, there could be several things going on here. When you say how often should you feed veggies, I think that depends very much on your setup, on your species of isopod, population density, the size, the quantity of veggies you're feeding, which veggies you're feeding, so many different things. But I do say that I do feed supplemental food much more often than once a month, but I'm not going to say that you're doing it wrong. It kind of depends on your goals too. Is your goal to keep a nice colony of isopods that's not breeding too crazily and is healthy, but just breeds a little bit and just kind of maintains the population or maybe slowly increases? Then maybe you don't need to do anything differently. Maybe you're totally fine. I'm certainly not going to say that you're doing it wrong if you only feed them veggies once a month. That's totally within the realm of reasonability. I don't see a problem. However, if your goal is to increase their breeding quite a bit more from where they are, then you definitely could consider giving them some more supplemental food more often. I tend to provide supplemental food 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more. It depends on what I'm trying to do with the colony, like I said. Supplemental food, and in that, I'm not just including vegetables, but things like high protein snacks like fish food, or moderate protein snacks, but high nutrient snacks like dog food kibble or whatever. I'm including all of those things. I'm including Supreme Isopod chow in that supplemental food. 2 to 3 times a week, and some colonies get it as often as every day. It depends on so much. Like I said, the population density, the amount of food you're offering, the number of isopods you have, the species of isopods. Some isopods just eat so much more than others. I have 2 colonies of exactly the same dimensions on my desk. One of them is Armadillidium gestroi. It's not too densely populated. And then the other colony, same dimensions of the enclosure, but the colony is mostly California mix with some orange lavis and some milkbacks thrown in there from long ago when I was experimenting to see what would cross. And I put them together, and the colony is still going. And I put food in there often. And one of the main foods I offer to them there, just for convenience, basically, and it's not the only food I offer, but it's the main one is just the dog food pellets. And I can throw a couple of dog food pellets in the lavis colony, and it's gone within hours. They just attack it, they swarm it. It's a pile of isopods, or if I put 2 pieces of dog food, in there, it's not a big culture either, but there are enough isopods in there that they swarm it, and it's gone within a few hours. The gestroi, if I put the same size piece of dog food in with fewer isopods and with isopods that just have a lower feeding response, it's there. Again, it's there for days. Sometimes I have to take it out before it molds. So hopefully that kind of addresses the question. I think it really depends on your goals, and it depends on your specific situation, but hopefully those ideas will give you some guidelines. Now, the last Patreon comment is from Alina, and Alina says, just saw pics of PA Pods, I hope that's how you pronounce that, PA Pod's new whiteout titans, Porcelia hoffmannseggi again, and notice their eyes are the same white color as the rest of their body. Why is that, and does it mess up their function? So, great question. Several isopod species, and apparently Porcelia hoffmannseggi is one of them, produce whiteouts. Another one that produces whiteouts, Porcelionides pruinosus. Another one is Cubaris marina, produces the glaciers, which are the same effect. There are others that I have that I know I have at least one other whiteout. Oh, nasatum, Armadillidium nasatum whiteout. And there are others out there too. And the idea is that all pigment production in the body is blocked, and that includes the eyes. Some forms of color mutation that reduce coloration. There's partial albinism, for example. There's like T positive albinism, which retains quite a bit of color, but definitely reduces like blacks and most melanins, but leaves some colors there. And then there are things like whiteout, which seem to completely eliminate the production of pigment in the body. The only way you get real color in whiteouts is if they're eating food that contains pigments, and then the animals sequester those pigments in their body tissues, but they're not producing the pigments, they're just storing them. And so you can get a whiteout that turns a little pink, and that's not because it's producing that, or even yellow. It's collecting these pigments from the environment. And some forms of albinism affect the eyes, and leucism, which is not the same as albinism, affects the distribution of pigment. So many times the eyes have pigment in them because of the way the animal develops. And then as the pigment spreads throughout the body, the distribution is interrupted and results in blue or black eyes, and then some spots on the body in some situations, irregular small spots, and then the rest of the body is white. But it may well affect vision in many creatures and many mammals. Albinism can affect vision. It can affect sensitivity to light. It can affect the acuity of vision, like how fuzzy it is. It will get fuzzier. It can cause other vision problems. And so I wouldn't be surprised if albinism, the form of albinism that is referred to as whiteout in many isopods, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it does affect vision. Very, very likely indeed. So I hope that helps. Very great question. So let's see. Kevin is asking, have you kept any of the garters out of brumation this year? I have kept 2 garters out of brumation this year. My young flame female, she was hatched in April, I want to say. I could be wrong about that. She's pretty young though. She comes from tea, and she's a young, fairly low expression flame, keeping her out. And I'm also keeping out our youngest, my only holdback red-sided tiny, keeping those 2 out of brumation. The other ones have been in brumation now for about a month, and I checked on them on this weekend sometime, I think, and they all look like they're doing great. So I'm excited to pull them out of brumation in about another month. Probably either at the end of this month or early next month is when I'm going to be pulling them out of brumation. And I found that 2 months seems perfectly adequate for getting the garters to breed really well. And I've been, excuse me, each year putting them in a little bit earlier and taking them out a little bit earlier, approximately. I mean, that's not exactly how it works out, but that's the overall effect. Because then I have the spring. They're going to hatch earlier, or not hatch. They're going to be born earlier in the spring, and then I have more time to let them grow out and make sure that they're doing all the things they need to do before I ship them, and without it getting too hot. Because what I've been doing in earlier years, I noticed that when they were born in mid-May, by the time I was sure, confident they're eating well, they're going to the bathroom, they're doing all the things they need to be doing, making sure that they're ready to go to new homes. I was having problems because as soon as they were ready to go to new homes, it was too hot to ship them. It was at least hot enough that I had to worry about it and be really super careful about shipping. And if I can just ship them a few weeks earlier, then I don't really have to worry about that. So that was my rationale behind all of that. Kind of a long-winded way to deal with it. So, Ik Tommy's Bestiary, welcome. Oh, Yotaro, there you go. Example of a human, a mammal, having partial ocular albinism. It does affect vision. So there you go. Ocular, of course, meaning relating to the eye. So Isobuddies, we are putting Panda Kings in the cup because I'm about to do, I'm about to rehouse these Panda Kings, and I want to get a good number of them together. Nice to see you here, Josh, by the way. Been a minute. We've chatted a bit online, but been a minute since I've seen you in the live stream. So that's awesome. Always welcome. Let's see. I know I'm not looking up as often as I would if just because I'm digging out all these isopods. Okay. That is probably enough Panda Kings to do what I want to do. So I will restore. Well, maybe I'll get a couple more. I'm just kind of digging them out as I see them, you know. There, that's probably enough for now. How are we doing? Isopods. And thank you, Zero Cool. Yes. And Insanity Skinks is here. So I said your name correctly. Good. I love it when I do that. Sometimes it's by pure accident. But I'm always happy when I'm able to do that. Let's see. What is the average cost of a panda? I feel like the Panda King isopods aren't much more, and it depends on where you get them, of course. I'm talking US dollars here, but in the US, so prices for Panda Kings in the US, in US dollars, that you can get a starter culture of 10 or so count for $20-ish, $25, something like that. So item 13, have you ironed out your process for leaf litter preparation for your pods? I have some methods that work really well. I'll be right back. I'm going to grab some leaves. Just going to rinse my hands off for a second. Okay. One method that I learned from Kyle Candillian and I think Boogie Down Bugs is to just put a big bunch of leaves in a container and fill the container with water and let it sit there for several months and add a little bit of molasses when you put the water in. And that leaf litter comes out nicely. It's faster than just letting leaf litter sit, especially around here where it's so dry. So I'm going to move these Panda Kings for a minute because I want to show you something. And that works pretty well, but it takes a long time. It takes months. But I was talking to Tennyson, and he was talking about fermenting leaves. And I am working on a process to ferment leaves. And I've experimented because I make fermented vegetables like sauerkraut, which sounds like it might not relate, but actually it does, because the fermentation processes for leaves and for things like sauerkraut have a lot in common. And this is an example of some leaves that I've fermented for, I think, less than a month, and they seem to really be doing the job. I am not comfortable saying this is what you should do until I've tested this out a little more. But so far, it's been really promising, not getting any mold. The effort is really, really low. I don't have to worry about stirring or anything, and it seems to be doing the job. So we shall see. But if it turns out that it works, and then I need to replicate it several times, and I need to see the results of how the isopods accept the leaves and so on. If it works, I will be revealing it, of course, to everyone. So somebody just asked me about my Bioactive cricket setup. I do still have it. I do still recommend it. And I'm actually doing an update video on it really soon, Anns, Michigan. Is this tasty on ribs? If you're an isopod, yes. So, like I said, it's not like I'm trying to hide the process. It's just I don't feel comfortable recommending the process yet, because I'm not sure what the effects are yet. So if this turns out to work well, then I will totally share it. It's just I don't want to say, oh, everybody do this, I did it, and when I haven't actually tested it, the results of it. I've done the process, and I think it's going to work, and that's part of what we're setting up right here. But I need to know that it works and that it's successful and doesn't kill isopods before I tell everybody about it. See what I'm saying? And the beautiful thing about this stuff is it looks like it's only going to take a month or less to work, rather than like a flake soil recipe, which takes a couple months typically. And so thanks again to Tennyson for the beginnings of this. I am using a method that's a little bit different from the method Tennyson talked about, but it's based on that method with some changes. So So here we go. So Minyasa, is it bad if all your leaf litter is oak? Well, it might not be ideal. It can be a really good thing to have a mix of leaf litters in there. Oak is great, but oak takes a long time to break down, and it is, there's a certain nutrient profile to the oak, which is a good nutrient profile, but it's not necessarily as complete if you had oak mixed with a few other things. So I'm not going to say it's bad, but it would be ideal if you could have maybe oak as your base and then mix in 25% of some other types of leaves or whatever. But you can have great results with oak as long as you address some of the variety and so on with other types of leaf litter. Fresh oak takes a long time to break down and get to the point where it's nutritious and palatable for isopods too. So keep that in mind. I am now doing a quick unboxing here, a live unboxing from Laura at BioLives, because I'm super excited about BioLives Substrate. There's some bacteria and fungal culture in there. I requested some of that. It seems like, I believe this is like the micro, it has, this one has, the fungal species are mycorrhizae, and it also has some bacterial species in there. So per 12 quarts of moist substrates to replenish microcolonies, and I'm assuming you could use it, since it says bioactive starter, not just replenish, but to begin with them. So one packet for 12 quarts. So you could do 2 6-quart bins with this fungal culture, which I may or may not do right now. We have some of the substrate here: rotting hardwood, compost, sphagnum moss, worm castings, backguano, charcoal, flake soil, oak leaves, calcium carbonate, and perlite. This substrate has done really, really well for me, which is why I decided to buy some more. So Laura at BioLive sent me a sample a while ago, and I tried it and loved it. And so then I actually bought some substrate, and she did send me some other samples to try along with it, like hardwood bark. We got here some pieces of hardwood bark, some rotting hardwood. Ooh, that's nice and soft. Love that. And some more hardwood bark pieces. So check out Laura BioLives. Check out BioLives, and there's BioLives Bioactive supplies. Check it out if you want to try it out. I have had great experience with it, and I'm pretty confident you will too. So maybe you should give it a go. So this right here is, I'm going to lower this down again. This is my microvarium, my original microvarium. I ran it with the original substrate and everything for a long time, and finally moved everything out and want to start again. So with some different isopods, I was going to put the Panda Kings in here with some of Laura's substrate. So I will be right back. I'm just going to grab some cork bark. I don't know if you heard that out of the oven. I was grabbing the cork bark out of the oven. I was just sanitizing some. So let's see. So Wolffire. Oh, I answered your questions earlier. So thank you for some excellent questions. Hopefully it works out that I was able to answer your questions to your satisfaction. So Corridora, isopods are pretty popular, and you could almost certainly find a local breeder, I would say. And oh, thank you, item 13. I do sell isopods, and you can buy some from me. I have a fairly limited selection because there's a small list that I ship. Because I have permits for a low number of isopods. I have, I think, 20 species on my list, and that's a lot of variety still, because some of these species, have so many different color morphs and things with them. But it's a limited selection compared to some others. I don't ship any of the giant Perselias across the state and things like that. I'm across state lines. things like that. But I do still ship quite a few different isopods. LF. Oh yes, I love to listen in on Invertebrate Dude's morning maintenance streams, like while I'm exercising, things like that. He has a lot of cool info. So yeah, that's a fun thing to do. And item 13, you did order some Isopods from me, didn't you? I remember. And I'm glad to hear they're doing well. I'm just trying to figure out where I put my moss. Ah, there it is. Okay. So I have some sphagnum moss I'm going to add first here. Which Isopod species did you order, item 13? Oh, and thank you, Frank the Tank, for putting my... Thank you, first of all, for the recommendations for many of you who recommended that you can get Isopods from me. And thank you, Frank the Tank, for putting the link up there. Love it. So just put a little bit of sphagnum moss over here on the side for their hydration station, as one does. And then I'm going to get some of this lovely BioLive substrate and put it in. I'm going to take a sniff at that substrate. It smells just like a forest floor, a little bit of tang to it, which I love. Not too much tang, but a little bit of tang. Gonna set this up here. This is really seeing how my isopods do on the substrate. If I could, this would definitely be one of those substrates that I would just buy in large quantities and put all my isopods on substrates like this. There are some other good ones that I found, so I'm not saying this is the only substrate I like. There are others too. But I've really enjoyed this one and found that it is an excellent one for my isopods. So since this is a small bin, I'm not going to put too much in here. I only want about 1 inch of base substrate in there. And of course, this has a lot of leaf litter mixed in with it. I'll probably add, well, I will add some more leaf litter, but here's a start. And I want to get some pieces of bark in there too. Some small ones. Let's see, there's a nice piece of very slightly concave bark. Another really small piece of concave bark. Larger piece. I'm going to do this because this is such a nice concave piece. I'm going to put it more next to the humid hide, and then I'll put that there. And I'm going to put this piece kind of overlapping that other one. And then I'm going to put a shell down here for food dish. I love using the flat scallop shells for the food dishes. And Monad Nomad, oh, thank you. Glad to see you here in the live stream for the first time. Oh yes, that's right. P. prunosus and Peacekeeper. Fantastic. Okay, so I need to add some springtails, don't I? I haven't done that yet. So let me grab some springtails. I'll be right back after I grab some springtails to add to this bin. See, we have 55 in the live chat right now. 55 people watching. We have 40 likes, which isn't bad at all. But it'd be awesome if we could get a few more likes in there. What do you say, folks? Can we do it? Can we get a few more likes? Okay. Now, I'm going to dust some springtails into there. And here's some nice springtaily moss put in. I don't know if you can see the springtails crawling around on that moss, but you can see a few of them. There's a lot of them. Let's see. So Karen S28 is shipping Titans from East Texas to Tennessee with a 72-hour heat pack too risky? Kind of depends on the rest of the packaging and how fast you're shipping it. If you're doing an overnight shipping and you have a very well ventilated box and the temperatures, you've checked the temperatures and it's not getting too cold anywhere, or too hot because you're in Texas. So, sometimes it can be pretty hot in parts of Texas, even in the middle of winter. So, as I'm sure you will know, if you are, because you can kill something by using a heat pack when it's hot outside, of course. People do that and they don't realize how dangerous that is sometimes. I'm sure you do, but I'm just putting that out there so people are aware of that. But it can be done. I don't like to ship in January unless it's express with a heat pack and good insulation. So typically, at least not the first part of January. Here where I am, I generally take a break from Thanksgiving until the middle to late part of January, for the safety of the animals. That's kind of how I do it, and I'm not saying it can't be done. Can certainly be done, but that's how I do it, and it seems to be safer. And yes, Tennyson mentioning the ventilation is important too. That can help them prevent them from being overheated with a heat pack, and it also can prevent them from getting too waterlogged and so on. So some good ventilation is important in a situation like that. Good to bring up. Yes, it's really, you need to, if you have breeders, isopod breeders typically are pretty good about including cold packs and heat packs. Um, so the springtail species I use, I believe, is Cecobria tenebricosa, formerly known as Sinella curviceta, and I'm trying to get into the habit of calling it the right thing. Is that right? Cecobria tenebricosa. I think Tennyson can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And ant sandy skinks, good point. There definitely needs to be a lot of insulating layers between the heat pack and the isopods too. I 100% agree. You don't want the heat pack right next to the isopods at all. It's a recipe for disaster. So are we ready? Should we put these in? Do it. Didn't allow you a lot of time for feedback in there too. I don't know exactly how many are in there. Probably somewhere between 30 and 50 of the Panda Kings. So this bin, I think with this substrate, I could easily let them get up to, I want to say at least 200 before I move them out of this bin. They're pretty they're pretty crowd tolerant for isopods, and there's a lot of surface area here, and I think the substrate is really good, nutrient rich substrate, so I think they'll do fine. They're looking pretty good, aren't they? Some things that I did here that may not be apparent to those who are newer to the hobby that will help get this started is this moss was going to have some microbial life in it that is going to kind of kickstart the enclosure. I also wanted to add some of the fermented leaf substrate, well, fermented leaf litter that I just showed you, and I may still do that. We'll see. Sorry, I don't want you to stare at my hands. That's weird. Oh, got to turn my light back on. Sorry, I forgot the timer. Pops off at this time. So there's a couple reasons. I saw that Aunt Cindy Skink had a question. What's the reason for separating the pandas? One is that they were due for a substrate change anyway. Definitely due for that. But two, I want to see what kind of density I can get on this substrate, because I've tested the BioLive substrate with a few different isopod species, and they've done really well on it, and as well as with some millipedes, which I guess I haven't talked about as much, but I've put some millipedes on it. And I just want to try it with some more isopods and see what I can do with the density in a small container, as well as just giving these Panda Kings a new home. And I also want to I'm anxious to test out my new fermented substrate as well. Yeah, item 13, cocoa fiber I think gets vilified in the isopod hobby. It can be really bad for some millipedes, really bad for some millipedes. Um, and some millipedes can actually breed on it, and I've seen that happen. I've done that myself. But um, even for generations, I've done it. But not all millipedes can do that. And it's not nutritious for isopods. When you do use it, you have to rely on other sources of nutrition for your isopods. So it's not a great option. Um, but I've raised thousands. I used to use cocoa fiber as a substrate. It's not the best option, definitely not. But it's not a horrible option for many isopods either. It can work. So here is some of this leaf litter that I fermented myself for approximately a month. Yeah, it has a funky fermented smell to it. So I'm just gonna put a few bits of it around here, which should help to give the isopods a good start. It'll give them something, if they like it, give them something that will help them to establish in here, because there will be bacteria on it. That's what's causing the fermentation in this case. Fermentation, uh, a lot of the fermentation that is done on a commercial scale in the world is done with yeast, and a lot of it is done with bacteria. Some of it's done with both. For example, most alcoholic fermentation depends on yeasts. Most lactic acid fermentation, like the kind you use to make sauerkraut, depends on bacteria. And then some, like the type used to make sourdough bread, needs both bacteria and fungi to do the job. So Sean Cooper, how many isopods can live in a 7-quart container? Um, well, it depends on the species. There are far fewer like Porcelia expansus that I would put in there than I would say Armadillidium hispanuli. So it really does depend on what you're working with. I would say though, with most small to medium isopods, I wouldn't hesitate to keep up to about 300 in a bin of that size, as long as everything is set up well and they have plenty of good substrate and food and whatnot. Wouldn't hesitate at all with most of the smaller ones. Some of the bigger ones, I might, um, some of the biggest isopods in the hobby, I might say no more than 20, 30 of them in there, and sometimes even fewer with some of the very biggest ones. So orang mango, I haven't tested my leaf litter for ammonia. Basically, ammonia can be a risk to isopods, of course. In high concentrations, can cause problems. I haven't found it necessary to test. Generally, when I put leaf litter in, the isopods really take to it, and so this is a bit of an experiment, but I'm pretty confident we'll be okay. But that's not a bad idea to do that. So this set of tweezers looks a lot like the one that came with the mealworm pod. This is actually a set I bought at the Reptile Expo a while back. It's a 3D printed set. From what I recall, you can kind of see the lines of the 3D printing, I think, in there a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe the glare's showing it off. Oh, sorry, knocked right into the camera. So there's that one. So I've got the Panda Kings. I need to make a label for them. How are we doing time-wise? We're okay. We're okay. That's good. I'm going to do a label, and we're going to look at some other isopods and things and do some more setups. So today is, we got Cubaris species Panda King, at least for now. Panda King, and the enclosure was established. It's, what is it? It's 01, 04, 24. First one I've done this year. So I'm printing out this label so I know when the substrate went in, when the isopods went in, all that stuff. Basically how I do it with all my cultures. Something like this, if I can focus. Yeah, and usually I put the source information if they're isopods that are new. from someone, like if they came from a particular supplier. These came from a local guy by the name of Eric. And I think I have that on my other label. I don't know if I do. Or if this was after I mean, that enclosure was set up on it before I started doing that. I'm not sure. But I do know where they are from. And here we go. Porcellia warner, I read they are territorial. My bin is starting to fill up. I have, that's inconclusive, Minyasa. I have Porcellia warneri, and I sometimes see dead adults in there, but the density is pretty high in the enclosure. Sorry. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull those out real quick here. And we'll see. I don't see a lot of issues with it. I do need to move them, I think. You see a few adults hanging around, but most of them are just here. And you see they're still producing a lot of babies. Most of the ones in here are juveniles in some stage, a number of adults as well. But this hasn't been a problem. I don't see any dead ones in there at this density. That doesn't mean, you know, they couldn't benefit from a bit more space. But there you go. Oh, I just got a super chat or a super sticker from Tarantula Collective. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. That's my first one of the year. So much appreciated. Much appreciated indeed. This container, this is from Pedro's Pods. By the way, Pedro's Pods sent me some enclosures with substrate, like full kits, and this was a kit. This is an enclosure without the kit, but he sent me some enclosures with full kits, and those are doing really well too. They haven't been going for as long. I set them up a little over 2 months ago, I guess. Is that right? Yeah. No? Yeah. Set them up a little over 2 months ago because it says November 2nd. So a little over 2 months ago. I want to show you the Pedro's Pod stuff that's going on here. I know I'm all over the place today. I am. I admit it readily that I'm all over the place, but it's kind of fun. So these are magic potions. These are the true pure line magic potions. They don't get purer than this because these come from the stock that Kyle Candillian refined after he was sent stock, founding stock from J. Fiore, and it's never been mixed with anything. So you cannot get pure magic potion American line. Well, you know, I only say that to distinguish because it's the true magic potion. But I want you to take a look at this. It's doing really well. These springtails, of course, are thriving on this substrate, as you can see. They're all over in the substrate as well. And some of this is leaf litter that I added, and some of this is leaf litter that came from him, I believe. Could be wrong about that. Maybe this is all his stuff. I don't know. But I'm hoping to see babies soon. One trait of the American magic potion, the true magic potion, is that they tend to get really large, grow slowly, and breed slowly, which is part of the reason that they're so sought after, because they're not a dime a dozen. You know, it's harder to get them. So thank you to Pedro's Pods for sending me this stuff. I really like his. I just haven't had as much experience with it because these are newer enclosures, but a newer substrate. You know, I haven't tried them as long, but I really like the way the enclosures look. I like the vents. I like how they have very fine mesh on the vents. Keeps a lot of stuff that you don't want in there out, and they're lockable. And they have these edges, I think, are better at keeping isopods from escaping than some of the other edges on some bins, just like the simple non-lockable sterilite bins. It can be easier for isopods to get out, I think. And let's take a look at this as well, shall we? This is the bigger bin that he sent me. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you, Beatrice. I appreciate the donation, and that is fantastic. I meant to put a like on. Oh, I can't put a like on that one. For some reason, it doesn't let me like the sticker, but it lets me like the super chat. But I really appreciate that, and it was a pleasure to answer your questions. So LF, let's talk about American and Japanese magic potions difference. Okay, American magic potions were isolated from stock collected in Georgia by J. Fiore, and they were refined and selectively bred for additional increased yellow coloration by Kyle Candillian of roachcrossing.com. They, like I mentioned before, get bigger than most Armadillidium vulgare, grow like the larger size and the slow growing and slow reproduction. So they're not the same thing. And so being called magic potion, we probably just should have called them Japanese Dalmatian or Japanese Pied. And that would be a more appropriate term. And I do call them that sometimes, trying to get the hobby to change. And it looks like Frank the Tank is saying things like that. So hopefully, LF, that helps. So Revol, isopods can nibble reptiles and arachnids and so on if they get too hungry. It is true, but it depends on the isopod, depends on the setup. Molting arthropods with isopods don't often mix very well because isopods are much more likely to attack a freshly molted arthropod than they would be to attack, say, a freshly molted reptile. Reptiles have a little bit more defense that way because they're not nearly as soft and vulnerable when they shed their skin. But yeah, under certain circumstances, it can be a risk, and depending on the species of isopod, it can be a risk too. So pairing them is kind of an art as well as a science. It's important to pair the proper isopods with the proper macrofauna, so to speak. Some species are really pretty safe. Porcelionides prenosis tends to be safe with a lot of reptiles and amphibians, but maybe not with all arthropods. Oren McMonagle mentions you probably should not keep isopods with things like beetle pupae, because exposed beetle pupae, they'll probably get nibbled on, with millipedes, things like that. And Happy New Year to you, Richard. Awesome. Another donation. That's fantastic. And really appreciate it. I hope you have an excellent year. I've seen some of your posts recently about the new year, and I thought they were awesome. And I wish you the very best this year, my friend. So Itchy Gur, do I keep rubber duckies? I do. I have 3 different enclosures with rubber duckies in them. Should we see if I can show a few rubber duckies? I was going to set up some other closures this evening during the video, but maybe I'll just show a few enclosures instead, because that was those were Porcelioscaber lava, one of my favorite. Well, my favorite Porcelioscaber morph of all time is Porcelioscaber lava with those colors. Love it. So just shared some of those with you. I wasn't talking about them. So item 13. Thank you for the super chat. That's awesome. Another super chat. Really appreciate it. Well, look at that. 64 people in the chat and 64 likes. How awesome. How awesome is that? Fantastic. So thank you, item 13, for the super chat. All right. Pink Panda Kings, Mike. Nope. I don't have that morph. Let's see. So let's see if we can put, oh, there's a rubber ducky right there, little one. There's a little rubber ducky on this piece of rotting wood, and another really small one right next to it. So there's a really, really small one right there. See it? See if we can dig up more. They're a lot more active at night, of course. There's a bunch of them. There's some in the wood, and there's a bunch in the substrate there. You can see a bunch of them are half buried, sticking out of the substrate. Those are some of my rubber duckies. So this is my smallest enclosure of rubber duckies, I think. No, there's none on that piece. See, I put this in a long time ago, and I wish I hadn't. I should just take it out. But it's hard to get all the rubber duckies out of the holes. But now the problem is setting it back down can be downright dangerous for the rest of them. So I have to be extremely careful when I do it. I'm super slow about it. It's You have to be extremely slow when you set them down, because if you set it down quickly, you could easily crush them. Um, and oh, that makes sense. Wolf fire with sun beetles, if they have pupa that they cover with a pupal cell, that can definitely make a difference, protecting the beetle pupae from the isopods. And Oniscus ocellus are not known for being particularly food aggressive either, so that helps as well. That's a great thing. So I'm going to set up another bin with some of these leaves really quick. Do we have time? I don't know. We'll see. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining item 13. We're about to head out in a couple of minutes here too. So Tennyson, okay. I do have Porcellia, since you live in the same state as me and we don't have to worry about shipping, because I can't transport Hoffman's egg eye across state lines. But since we're in the same state, I do have Porcellia Hoffman's egg eye black. So, so yeah, we could do that. I love Porcellia Hoffman's egg eye black. They're one of the easier ones. They're faster breeding. They're really active, excellent feeding response. So if your dad is interested in those, we could totally do that. I don't know if he is, but the main difference between Porcellia Hoffman's egg eye black, besides the ones I already said, and the obvious color difference, they're quite a bit darker, is that Porcellia Hoffman's egg eye black does not have as much sexual dimorphism. The Europods are not nearly as long in the males, but they're super cool. Do I have a hot date tonight or something? I don't know. I will. I haven't really talked about the evening to my wife yet, but the night is still young, so who knows? Could be. Let's see. So Jacob Halflinger, your dairy cow isopods are not eating as much compared to your armadillo officinalis. How many do you have? Generally, a new enclosure is a new colony is not going to be nearly as hungry for a couple of reasons. One is because they're generally a smaller group, and another is because there's probably fresh substrate. They're getting a lot of food from that. Okay, so ooh, I got a super chat from somebody. Love it. Thank you. Let's see. So and so Tennyson, yes. Message me on Instagram and we'll get it set up. I'm all for it. Let's do it. I have plenty of them. All right. So I'm going to set up some of this with this piece of hardwood bark that got from BioLives. And the substrates from BioLives, the moss I just bought online. I'm not sure what I'm going to put in here yet. I have some different options. Just ripping through the bag here. Maybe like that. Put this over here. Need to put some leaf litter in there. But it is just about time to cut out, it looks like. So I better get on that. It's been a good stream. I appreciate, at least from my standpoint, I appreciate all the comments on Patreon. I appreciate all the super chats. I appreciate all the questions everybody brought in that were not related to those either. They're just people who participate in whatever form you participated in. I appreciate all of it. And you're great. I hope you have a wonderful 2024, and I'll do my best to keep this kind of content coming and other types of content so that you can enjoy the streams. Thanks, everybody, and take care.